Here I've got a 2016 Jeep Patriot. Just got dropped off to get some work done. Let me explain to you how we got down to the conclusion of what this car needs. So the owner called me saying, hey, I need to get my rear brakes done because they're grinding. Her car has rear drum brakes back there. And I was like, let me check my records. Sure enough, less than a year ago, I did her front pads and rotors and rear drum shoes. Okay, so I told her there's no way in heck, less than a year you already need new drum shoes? That doesn't make sense. So I told her, you know what, before we throw any parts at the car, because she really wanted me to just order the rear brakes, I told her, bring it over, let me look at this because this doesn't add up to me. Sure enough, she comes over. The first thing I noticed is this thing has brand new front brakes on it, new pads and rotors, and I asked her about that. She was like, yeah, I had like a family member or something get it done. And I told her, and I'm guessing it didn't fix your problem, right? And she's like, yeah. So I took it out for a test drive, just no different from the test drive that I'm doing right now. And guys, it took me less than 3 minutes to find out that this thing has a bad wheel bearing. Let's see if you guys can listen to this. So hopefully you guys heard that wheel bearing. I checked it when it was here last time and it's not loose. The wheel bearing doesn't have any play or anything like that. It's just making a noise. So let's go ahead, jack up the car and get this part changed. She did order her own part and it's gonna be the rear left side. So let's go ahead and get this thing up on the lift. If only. Here we got the classic move of the caps missing off of the lug nuts. So we got 19 mil right here. Oh, that came off tight all the way to the end. That's not good. And then the rest of it missing the caps. So we got our fractional size of 18 mil. Oh, I just don't like the way these things are coming off. Hopefully this drum comes right off. And hopefully it's not the case. Before I forget, let's put the jack stand on so that the internet doesn't crucify me. Alright, so I got my dead blow hammer here. Just give it a few love taps. And yes, the parking brake is not engaged. You know you want to. She's almost there. She's crowning. Come on. There we go. The shoes back here still look decent. Oh, you know what? I should have spun the wheel while the wheel was still on it so you could hear that bearing a little bit better. But I'm sure you guys could still get a sense of this. Get you as close as I can. So that right there is not a good sound. With the weight of the vehicle sitting on the bearing and then traveling at, 20, 30, and even worse, 60 miles per hour, this thing gets pretty loud. And thankfully, this vehicle is not all-wheel drive, so there's no axle shaft or anything like that to deal with. It should be pretty straightforward to get this thing out of here. Oh, just to show you guys something, I have switched over in headlamps. I've been using this Milwaukee one for years, and it's been fine, but I decided to upgrade because this one, it's just basically the batteries aren't lasting as long as they used to, and to be honest, even right out the box the batteries didn't last that long. They it chews right through them. So this thing has a few compounding issues. Number one, you can see it uses a micro USB, which is crap. Everybody hates these. The battery that's in it is rechargeable, obviously, but it's a proprietary battery, meaning if it goes bad, you got to pay an arm and a leg to get another one from Milwaukee, and that sucks. And on top of that, my strap is very loose because it's wore out, so it barely wants to stay on my head anymore. And there's a lot of things here. And when I went to, like, say, Home Depot's website to look at these Milwaukee products, it's a lot of the same crap. The battery life on them, what's written on the package, isn't great. They're still using the same crappy port, the micro USB. And again, they're still using their proprietary batteries. I'm not a fan of any of that stuff. So I switched over to Coast. Number one, it costs less than in Milwaukee. Number two, no more micro USB. It actually has a USB-C, which, you know, that's kind of a more modern thing. It has a rechargeable battery from Coast, but you could also swap it out for regular batteries that are just on the market. Really nice. And of course, the strap is not loose. So that's just something that comes with a new product. But also the runtime on this thing is much longer than this one. And I'm not talking because this one's old and wore out. That makes sense. I'm talking like right out the package. When this thing was brand new, the runtime of the Lite was crappy. This one is way better. So there's just so many benefits, and it was easier on my wallet than to go out and buy another Milwaukee. So I made the switch, and so far I've been pretty happy with this one. All right, so from behind the wheel bearing, you can see the ABS sensor. It's going to be a 10 mil. So let's go ahead and zip this out of here. All right, so there's that. And now we could remove the bolts, which I believe are 17 mils. So let's see. Yep, it's a 17. All right, so let's go ahead and zip these out of here. All right, that's the first one. Second one. That's the fifth one. And that's the fourth one. So in a perfect world, at this point, the hub would just come right off. You know, like the people that live in Texas and Florida and crap like that. But that's not where we're at. Okay, so this thing is not going to come off without a fight. So what I want to do is try to press the wheel bearing to separate away from the backing plate. And I'm going to use this, the Astro 78834. I've had this for a few months, and this is actually the first time I had a chance to use it. So it's called Last Chance Impact Rated Hub Removal Bolt Kit. Guys, it's just a fancy smancy bolt with a fancy nut on it. That's all it really is. So I mean, if you have a long bolt and some nuts, you could get this done yourself without buying a kit like this. But for people like me that like to have the actual tool, there goes the part number. You can check my Amazon list. It's in the description. So the plan here is, let's get the nut off of here, and I'm gonna come in here just like this and push up against the backing plate. Make sure you're not touching the hub itself. You want to be on the backing plate, and we're going to use that to press against. Oh, and don't forget to use these little metal caps that came inside the bag. They are the parts that go on the end of the bolt like that, so you're not digging into whatever you're pressing against. So I decided to use both of the forcing screws to try to get the hub to come off evenly. So what I'm going to use is my Knipex non-marring pliers here, and use that to hold the nut on the backside. And then the hex itself on the bolt is a 19 mil. So we're going to try to run them in. Hopefully it comes off without too much of a fight. All right, so that one's moving. Let's go to the other one. And what you want to do is just basically work back and forth here. So the whole backing plate has separated from the knuckle. You can see this whole thing is moving now. But we want to keep going because we still want the wheel bearing to separate from the backing plate. I'm telling you, these things put up a fight. They really don't like coming off of the backing plate. But I think we have it right there. Sure do. So by far, this is the easiest method to remove these wheel bearings, is to use these forcing screws. And I've gotten away with just using a regular nut and bolt, but then you're spending time looking through your collection trying to find what works, what doesn't. Whereas this kit from Astro is very inexpensive, and you know exactly where it's at in your toolbox. No wasting time looking for it. So you saw how nicely it pulled that off. I've had to fight these before I even thought of this idea to do anything like this, or even had this tool, and it took me significantly longer to get the wheel bearing to separate from the backing plate. One thing you want to pay attention to is this vehicle actually has a spacer. You can see it moving around independent right here. So there's a spacer between the trailing arm and the backing plate. So you want to make sure that goes back into place. Here we got our brand new wheel bearing. It's a Timken one. It's a good quality part, and I got it sitting outside the box right here, and I've already sprayed it with CRC to protect it from corrosion. I like to spray the hub face right here, as well as the mounting surface where it mounts up to that backing plate. When you're ordering parts, if you're doing this on your vehicle, be aware that there are two different parts, okay? This car's front wheel drive, so there's no rear axles in here. So that's the part we have here, front wheel drive. If you have an all-wheel drive one, make sure you get the correct wheel bearing because they are different. Let's go ahead and get this thing installed. Normally at this point I do a lot of rust cleaning, but this honestly looks pretty good, so not too much here. I'm just gonna get a wire brush. One more thing you have to be aware of is you can install this thing a full like 180 degree out of where it's supposed to be. You can see the port over here for the sensors on the right side, but when we removed it, it was actually on the left side. So you got to make sure you install it like that, or else the sensor, when you go time to plug it in, it's not going to reach. As you can see, because of the spacer in the middle, it could be tricky to line all this stuff up when you're trying to get the new wheel bearing installed. So I think it's easiest to just grab the bolts for the wheel bearing and feed it through the back and just use them to line up everything. I got the first one in, and you don't want to push it all the way through, just enough so that the threads are catching. And the same thing, we're going to put two of them in here, and that's good enough. You can see everything is aligned using the two bolts, and when we go to put the new wheel bearing in, it should just fall into place, and we could use the bolts that are sitting here to start threading into it. Right, so I got those first two bolts that I put in, and they're actually threaded into the wheel bearing. We'll get the other two bolts, and I like to put some thread locker on these, which I didn't do for the first two ones because it was just for the sake of alignment. And here goes the second bolts. You can see they got blue thread locker on them, so I'm gonna go ahead and run them in. And like I said, once I get these in, I'll pull out the first two and apply thread locker to those. Okay, so the wheel bearing is fully installed, the bolts are torqued down, the sensor is plugged in, and that has the retaining screw back on it. I even reapplied a little bit of CRC onto the hub face right here where I was handling it, trying to get it installed, because I did wipe some of that corrosion protection off, so I reapplied it. Everything looks really good. I'm just gonna go ahead and pop the drum back on it, and guys, we are just about done here. Alright, so we ran into a little bit of an issue. If you guys remember at the beginning of the video, I had a hard time, not a hard time, but I said that the lug nuts came off like pretty rough, right? Well, I was hoping, since we had brand new studs on a new wheel bearing, that the new lug nuts would just go on, but it seems like the damage is also part of the lug nut itself. So I got this kit right here. It's like a thread chaser kit, and I grabbed the number 12 die, and it seems to thread on nicely to the brand new studs. So that means if I grab this number 12, we could use it to clean out the threads in each of the lug nuts. So let's go do that. All right, so I got the lug nut right here on the vise. And guys, I almost made a mistake because I grabbed the first 12mm out of the kit, and that would have been wrong because this is a M12 by 1.75, which these lug nuts are M12 by 1.5. So we're gonna use this one. First of all, a little bit of penetrating oil. Started by hand, and almost like immediately it starts to get tough. So instead of just running it in with an impact gun, we're gonna go by hand just to get a feel for everything. And it feels like it's starting to clear up now. Let me clean it off with some brake parts cleaner because we're gonna have to come back. Just gonna get the thread started once again in reverse. Look at that, it almost completely came out just by using my fingers. Hit it with some brake parts cleaner again because I don't like putting lug nuts on with any type of grease or lubricant. I don't think it should be on there. So we'll let this dry off. Let's go over to the vehicle and see how well it fits. All right, so here it goes right here. We'll just try on this one. It's a little tight, nothing to be concerned with. Let's go ahead and put the socket on it to get a better grip. You can see I'm using no tools, okay? No very long ratchet or impact gun. And the fact that I could actually thread it in by hand, yeah, it's a little stiff, but that's a big improvement. and we're gonna have no issues torquing this down. All right, so let me go ahead and do the same thing to the rest of the lug nuts, and this thing will go on nice and smooth without damaging any threads. And there you have it, all of them threaded in nicely, no issues at all. So let me go ahead and torque the wheel down. We'll take this thing out for a test drive. And I just want to point out that you know, something like this, yeah, there's little things like this that I care about because I know it turns into a big problem in the future and nobody wants to deal with this type of crap. Like say she gets a flat on the expressway at 11 p.m. and she's out here trying to change her own wheel, right? And now she has to deal with mangled up threads because someone decided to just run it on like that. And this is the type of stuff you don't get when you take your car to your local Jiffy Lube to get your wheel bearing changed, because the tech there probably doesn't care. He's just trying to get the wheel bearing job done as fast as possible, and he's just going to run these lug nuts on even though they're not right. One more final thing. When I spin the wheel, that noise is gone. Alright, let's see if we could listen to this noise, see if there is anything or not. One thing I am noticing is that the steering wheel is crooked to go straight, and for the life of me I can't remember if it was like this on my first test drive. If you hold it straight, the car pulls to the right really hard, and I'm thinking to myself, like, no, there's no way in heck doing a rear wheel bearing affected the alignment like that. So I'm not concerned with it. It's just baffling that I didn't notice it on my first test drive. I tried to look at the footage, but of course the footage is of me holding the camera like this high, so I can't really tell the position of the steering wheel. Anyway, I'm not going to be worried about this because, yeah, there's no way putting on that rear wheel bearing caused the steering wheel to be off like this. It must have been like this already and I just didn't notice it. Anyway, that's going to be it. I could definitely tell a difference in this vehicle, that wheel bearing noise is gone. So that's going to be it, guys. Like always, thanks for watching.